Hey everyone, Happy New Year. Welcome to the first episode of 2023 for the Unqualified Film Bros podcast. We're all back in our normal spaces on the Zoom call after we were all moved around for last week's top five lists and so on and so forth. We're, we hope you guys liked our lists last week, liked our picks. We hope you guys are figuring out what you guys are most anticipated for this year. We're starting 2023 with one of the last movies of 2022 in similar fashion to how we started 2022 with a couple of December 2021 releases. Because there's not that much out yet from 2023 as we record this on the fifth night of the year. So this week and next, we're talking about 2022 releases, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the new year after that. But for now, we're talking about Babylon, Damien Chazelle's testament to the greatness and perhaps lost history of the transition from silent films to talkies in early Hollywood. So for the first time in this brand new year, what'd you guys think?
I had a bit of the unfortunate thing where I miscalculated the time it would take to watch the movie. So by the end of it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to get out because I need to be somewhere." So in the film's slight
Did you
defense,
think
before
that
I
the three
criticize it
hour,
for being
9 minute movie was going to be less than 3 hours and 9 minutes?
I forgot to include previews for when
Gotcha.
I would be like free again, and so
Basically, when it's a 3 hour movie, round up to four.
I honestly should have.
Like it was a 4 hour commitment, essentially.
Yeah. No, I yeah.
And
Full of,
Avatar is so much
Yeah.
longer. Not really. It's like 3 minutes longer.
Yeah, the same thing.
It's the same.
Anyway, but
Go
but
on.
but nonetheless. So when I say that I will admit that possibly isn't the best way to experience this hours long epic. But with all that said, I did kind of feel I kind
Hold
of
on, hold on. I have to stop you right there because
not point, but
in the
it
beginning,
didn't hurt me. I hate to say, I respect the technical achievements and the performances, but I wish I was more on board with the film than I am right now. It's not bad, but I didn't.
Do you
I don't
think
know if I can say I liked it.
do you think a big part of that might be that you felt rushed? Like you had the time in the back of your head and you were anxious about that, and so it might have taken away from your viewing experience?
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that could be a part.
I just have to point out that, like, you say that, but we were told in the beginning of this film that we were watching it the way it was supposed to be watched. So,
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, Margot Robbie and Diego Calva. Yeah, I just want to point out that my theater, and I saw this the Monday afternoon after Christmas Day. I saw it December 26th, 2022. And my theater was, the lobby of the theater was packed because everyone goes to the movies the day after Christmas.
yep.
My theater for Babylon was about 60% full at like 1:30 in the afternoon on a Monday, the day after Christmas. So when Margot Robbie and Diego Calva give their sort of pregame speech saying, "Thank you for experiencing this movie in the way that it was meant to, with a packed audience and lots of energy," I was just thinking, George, please don't laugh. Please don't laugh. This isn't
My
packed.
theater, since I watched it later on, was like there were four other people in the theater.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was a little bit.
It was in a tiny theater too. Like they couldn't even fill that.
Gosh.
I saw it late, and then I saw it. I unfortunately had to go to a 9 o'clock
Mm.
viewing based off of like the schedule and everything. Everything else was too early. But yeah, I had to go to a nine. I went to a 9 o'clock on or yesterday, I think it was yesterday. And so there were like 10 people, so it was more than I thought that there would be.
It's also been out 3 weeks at this point.
Yeah,
That is true.
so it's like they did pretty well to get that many people. But yeah, that was my viewing experience. But it was funny when they came up and it was like in a packed theater. It was like,
Yeah, it's a little bit.
it's not that. It's a little presumptuous.
That said, a packed house for, say, La La Land or Whiplash would have been electric.
Mm-hmm.
Even a packed house for Babylon, though, and this is me sort of getting into my thoughts on it before we get into what Max and Ben thought. Even in a packed house, I don't see how this film, granted the opening party sequence, after you got the scene with the elephant, and we'll talk about the scene with the elephant. But during the first, 20 minutes of the film at that party, the energy's up, the music, the lights, the dancing, the costumes, the crowd. I mean, that was one of the most electric parts of the movie. And then it was a really, really like well-made film after that, but I don't see how like a crowd, like an opening night energy type thing, would have felt any differently than my slightly more than a half full audience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the film.
Yeah. I don't know when you would have a crowd doing anything. I mean, it's not exactly a story where it's like, yeah, oh my God, they're doing cocaine, yeah, or oh my God, she overdosed, yeah. Like, there's so much going on. Like, what are you cheering for? What are you laughing about? I
Yeah.
think that's my criticism of the film too, which is
Mm-hmm.
it's bloated. There's too much going on. I mean, you can't follow a single thing in this film. It's like the party is fun, but the entire movie feels as misdirected as a party. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's like the writing was drunk.
It's a little chaotic, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was a flaw of this film that isn't there in Whiplash and La La Land. And I haven't seen First Man yet, which granted I need to because Damien Chazelle is one of my favorite writer directors working right now. This film could have been tighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just as one example, one part that did stand out to me as like indicative of issues I have with the film. The scene with like the jazz trombone player who like becomes a star. It's like he's both give like sub and like his individual scenes are good, and of course, again, well acted, well made. But like by the end of his story, when it's just like, well, I'm no longer in the pictures anymore. I'm just playing jazz in my
Well,
band apartment. I was
okay, well, I'll defend that because I mean, you think about what he went through, right? It wasn't a normal experience. It shouldn't be a normal experience for anybody. Like
no.
he was pressured by the guy that brought him into show business, into doing something that none of us could ever equate to anything else in our lives, right? And especially at that moment in the 1920s, early 30s, was probably even more heightened than it would be now, right? Because it's so relevant to what they were working with in this new medium of live and in a studio under the lights, right? This was unprecedented. And because it was such an experience that he will never forget, he's back home. He's where he's comfortable. He's doing what he loves, playing music that he loves. And so his story ends up being far more of a success than I think really any of the other characters at this point.
Yeah, I think.
To be clear, I'm not talking about. I feel like the individual scenes are like well made. I definitely agree with you. Like you're absolutely right, Max. For me, my problem was just I wasn't sure if the film successfully made it have relevance for the entire story. Just to be clear.
I'll
And
defend
that's
Declan's take here.
Hmm?
Well, let me defend his take first, George.
okay.
Which is that I love jazz. I probably love jazz more than any of you. Um,
You like
George,
jazz?
even you. How much jazz do you listen to? But I
You
digress.
probably got me beat there, but not by much.
He agrees with him. No.
The main thing is Damien Chazelle clearly loves jazz music, which is great. It works in Whiplash, obviously, because the entire thing's about jazz. In La La Land, it works. It's a nice foil to Hollywood. But here, I'm with Declan. While it does fit the sound, breakthrough, this story just doesn't work for me. You never really get to meet him. You never get to see him do anything. He's tacked on more than he's fleshed out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not a good enough story for me. It's the same jazz fairy tale that he tells all the time, and one that I'm not very happy about. That's my one criticism for La La Land is he seems to have the Wynton Marsalis approach, which is stuck in the past. And this whole movie is that on steroids. Is it's too stuck in the past. I mean, it doesn't really say anything. It's just appreciating his influences, but it's not a movie. I mean, it doesn't really have a story for me.
Before we move on to the story, I just want to have one more note on Sidney Palmer, our esteemed trumpet player. I'm going to back up something that Max said, and that his character, you see early on his interactions with Manny, Diego Calva's character, and how he sort of brings him into show business and then sort of leaves him to build his own career. What we see through each of those characters in a very similar way, when you look at it with a broad lens, is sort of a combination of heroic versus tragic arcs. They each sort of see their lives go up, 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 down, down, down. And while they each sort of end up in maybe more of a melancholy place than they were expecting at their heights, or when they had these big dreams, early on in the film, they're still ending up at a place where, like you see with that great montage in the, closing minutes of the film with Manny, as he's in a theater 20 years later, they end up at a place where, and Sydney's another great example, playing jazz, in a small room with a small amount of people. And I've said this phrase a lot now. They end up in a place where they are content. They're content with what they have done with their lives. And
Yeah,
I think that's both heroic and tragic for each of them within the confines of this epic story. So while you're right about how they sort of get there, the broad lens shows them as very similar characters that have depth, have meaning to the story. I agree that Sydney maybe wasn't, we didn't expect to spend as much time with him as, say, Jack Conrad or Nellie Leroy, but he's as crucial a part to this story as the two of them, or as Manny is.
well, sure, but in a movie where probably an hour of just shots that mean nothing, I think you could probably include a little bit more story to what you're saying is a central piece to the story. But for me, he just doesn't feel like a real enough character. I mean, we meet him, but it's a MacGuffin, it's like this is just to show character less than he is a character himself. And to me, that is a sign of bad writing. I mean, while there are times where that can work, you have to make them a little bit more believable. When you show him on film so much and you still have no idea who he is, that's bad writing to me. And the foil part, I feel like everyone's a foil in this. I mean, Jack Conrad, Nellie, they're all foils for each other, rising stars, falling stars, and then arriving where they do. But his story just, you could take it out, and while there are things you can pull from it, you should flesh it out or not have it at all. But I mean, this movie just, there's other things that I would remove too. Like, frankly, I think you should keep it and flesh it out more. But that's my criticism for the entire film, which is just, there's this nature, like I was saying, of just appreciating the past and showing it. But it doesn't mean anything to us. I mean, it may mean something to him, but it's not part of the story. And I shouldn't say it's not part of the story. Obviously, everyone's fascinated with Hollywood in this story, but I can't draw anything from it. It's like,
yeah,
the bad parts of Hollywood, the good parts of Hollywood, the stars fall, the stars rise, but there's nothing more to it, and the people don't even feel real enough to me to emphasize with them, other than Diego Calva. I think Manny is the best character. He's the best written. You can certainly see his hopes, desires, dreams better in this film than probably anyone else's.
Diego Calva is getting a ton of praise for this movie, and duly so. Let's break down Manny a little bit.
Personal.
I mean, he's been in movies and TV shows before. This is the first like mainstream Hollywood movie that he's done.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I was just blown away by his performance. I'm sure you guys were too, but let's talk about him. What do you guys think of Diego Calva and sort of just bursting onto the scene with what is now a Golden Globe nominated performance, likely an Oscar nominated performance?
I think he does. I like, oddly enough, I honestly feel all the cast members do a great job, it's the one thing about,
except maybe Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire, we should get.
I'm just not on Tobey Maguire.
Talk about Tobey later.
We got to put a pin in Tobey Maguire because I have things to say. I feel like everyone does a good job. The one thing I would sort of I would criticize about the writing of the character is he sort of says at the very beginning, while high on cocaine, I feel like that put there, oh, I believe in movie making and the power of the art, and this can be great things. I kind of wish at the least the film had found a way to, for me personally, I felt like that wasn't as integrated into the story as it was like him at the very least having some struggle with his ideals versus the play studio boss, that sort of thing.
Well, the entire time he's waiting for a camera, that whole sequence is him. It's reflective of his struggles, and I think that scene serves as sort of, all right, these are going to be some of the, I hate this phrase, but trials and tribulations that he goes through in his meteoric rise, because what we want to see, what I would want to see as a writer director and what I would want to see as an audience member is the good stuff. I want to see him shooting high up the ranks at a studio, alongside Jack Conrad as he's sort of bringing him up from party attendant and animal wrangler to, production assistant to eventually director. So I think we do see some of Manny's struggles, even though they're not as present as his successes. I think that we do see, and obviously later on when he's trying to fix Nellie's problem for her, and we'll talk about that, he does have a hard time through a lot of this movie.
He has a hard time the entire movie. I want to be clear on that, right?
Yeah.
Because his struggles aren't going to be, at least what we're shown on screen, they're not going to be him fighting with studio executives to try and get some of his movies made or his pictures made. They're going to be far more internalized, right? I mean, you think about who he is, and you hear it later in the film when he I think either doesn't correct or says that he's Spanish.
Oh yeah,
Instead
they
of
ask him like,
Mexican.
"Oh, are you from Mexico?" No,
Right.
Spain, which is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
fascinating.
And part of that throughout the entire movie is like the emphasis on he is Mexican, and whether or not you you can also kind of think about it in this way, and I was as well, like, okay, yeah, sure, he actually Mexican, or is he from Europe but isn't, but it obviously ends up being clear at the end, towards the end of the film, that he has had identity crises throughout the entire movie, and that was his struggle. His struggle was that, and figuring out what his place is and was in Hollywood as a Mexican creative
Not to
in the
mention,
1920s.
not to mention the external struggle that he has every time he's with Nellie, because we hear that first night at the party, as things are wrapping up, he tells Nellie that he's in love with her. And that's present throughout. Like, his love for her does not go away, no matter how hard she makes it to be with her, to love her.
Yep.
I think, we see him sort of put himself and his issues aside to care for her. And that's, like Max just said, a struggle that he internalizes to ultimately help someone else, while maybe not achieve the best version of themselves, as we see for Nellie in the third act of the film, but certainly a better, situation for themselves.
One thing that
Please.
I'm gonna cause a bit of strife here. I have to bring up a movie I was thinking a bit about while watching Babylon. That's a film I enjoyed.
Wait. Let us guess what it is first.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, take a guess.
West Side Story.
That's a fair guess. No, but fair guess.
Max, what do you got?
Oh gosh, I'm honestly scared where you're going with this, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I don't.
That's fair.
I don't like surprises.
So I'm not gonna make a guess. I refuse to make a guess.
All right, I'm gonna guess what we were talking about earlier. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's also a very fair guess. No, I'm going to talk about a film that I saw and enjoyed a fair amount. Amsterdam. Anyway,
I enjoyed it too.
I liked it too. I know Ben had very valid criticisms of it, but so it's funny to me.
Something out of pocket. Yeah, like, I honestly thought you were gonna say something wild.
No, yeah.
I thought you were gonna say Guardians too.
Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. No, kidding. Anyway, so anyway, sorry. I had to have fun with the Amsterdam thing. In Amsterdam, I honestly felt that the central characters, their relationships with one another, being both makes sense to compare them. But it's I felt compelled by their connections with one another. I felt like almost every scene had at least something to do with the characters, like their own journeys and how they feel about one another, with also what turned out to be a central thing about stopping the business plot, stopping fascism. I mean, obviously historical fiction, did not actually happen, kind of fucked up that David O. Russell implied happened, but regardless, I felt like
David O. Russell has done worse things.
Yes, that's the point I was trying to make here. But I felt that there was the central core here. In Babylon, I felt there wasn't that central core relationships between Manny and Nellie, and that's almost by design. It seems like Manny is in love with Nellie, to Nellie with Manny. She likes him, but it's and there are parts so often that I felt like I never got the great character, the strong character like development and growth that I would have wanted from a film as long and as grand as this one, combined with the fact like whole thing being, you know, the change from silent films to sound is kind of a bit of a well-worn central thing to
yes, it very much is.
yeah, it kind of I felt a bit let down by the writing here is what I'm trying to get at. You know, I felt the characters again, like not the fault of the cast. I think they all did an excellent job. I just felt the writing for the characters wasn't as strong as it should have been.
I'm gonna agree, sort of, and that it reminded me of Amsterdam.
You do not have to imply liking Amsterdam, by the way, Ben. I want to make that
clear. It reminded me of Amsterdam.
I just want to, Ben, before you jump in, Ben, and I do want to hear what you have to say. But that whole thing just now that you guys just heard was Declan making up for the fact that he wasn't on the Amsterdam episode.
That is true. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't think the writing was very good in Amsterdam. I didn't think the writing was very good in this film, but I thought there were times where it was better than Amsterdam. I would say the writing is a very hit or miss. There are sections of the film that are really poignant and have a lot to say, but they're just intercut with a lot of unnecessary scenes. Scenes that just take you away. I mean, it's similar to Amsterdam in the way that like Amsterdam was a lot shorter, but there are editing choices there that just took you away from the action, took you away from the characters, which hurt. But in this one, it's on like 11. I mean, it's 3 hours and 9 minutes, and there's nothing to justify that. It enjoys putting on a show on screen, but that only goes so far. And I'm not going to say that like the characters themselves, I don't think they're bad characters. I mean, I think they have some serious like weight to them, but they're not given enough time to develop. There's ideas, but none of them are developed, and that's, I think, a problem with the film. Is there's a lot of ideas here, too many, to properly do something with. It would take a real like crazy genius to work this into something that is believable in all of its aspects and that they fit together fluidly. Like right now, it's a bunch of ideas with potential. I mean, I think some parts of the film are great, but they're just not put together well enough. And to piggyback on what you said, Declan, yeah, sound films, silent films, absolutely worn. It was worn after The Artist one. Hugo had also done a similar thing, and Hugo is thought about with this film, which is Hugo is an entirely unique story that has the backdrop of Hollywood, but it is much better done because the story is paramount, not Hollywood. And I think that's the problem here is Damien Chazelle is too focused on appreciating Hollywood that the story cannot ring through that. It's just a story in Hollywood about Hollywood, but the characters, you can see something for every Hollywood story, but they don't feel unique enough to me. I've seen the story before, you know?
Yeah, it felt like it was telling a Hollywood story, which was like compacted by using Hollywood as a lens. And I think what you said about Hugo is a film that I saw in theaters almost 12 years ago when it first came out. I haven't seen it since, and that's a huge regret of mine that I need to rewatch it this year.
It's on HBO.
Oh,
I have no excuse then. But Hugo, Ben, you're exactly right. It tells a Hollywood story, but with a different lens. And I think, you know, telling a Hollywood story through a Hollywood lens works. Declan, you mentioned Singing in the Rain. That's a classic example of a film that uses both and works.
But it's a worn idea at this point, especially after all of the films. I mean, The Artist was like 4 years ago now.
and you can still tell a compelling story with the Warren idea, but there has to be something more to it. And I hate to say it, but I felt like Babylon didn't have something more in my
2011.
I'm gonna like this movie on principle because one, I love Damien Chazelle, and two, I love movies about making movies.
I do too.
Like the whole sequence where we're seeing, actually the two sequences where we're seeing Nellie Leroy during her rise to stardom, and it's, you know, these long like 10-12 minute sequences, just Nellie and her director, and you know, take after take after take. Those are brilliant. Those are my favorite
parts. What you're talking about, I think, is probably to the detriment of the film, which is, I mean, I love film, and some of those moments were fun, but it's a film made by a filmmaker who loves film for people who love film. I mean, specifically people like you who love the technical aspects. But it's not a film that, like,
guys, I get to be on set 3 times this year. I'm very excited about that.
It doesn't work as much for a film, but it's fun, you know. And I'm sure it was a hell of a lot of fun to work on.
Yeah.
And fun to, you know, write. It just seems like it was so much fun to produce, but they didn't quite think about how to put it all together. I mean, frankly, like, this is it's hard to put this together, like I said. But they probably could have used with some editing in the script, like a lot of editing. I mean, honestly, La La Land tells more of a story in 1 hour's less time, if that. Like, I don't even know if it's a full 2 hours.
It is. It's like 209, something in there.
Not that long, yeah.
So 1 hour less in this film.
Yeah.
And a lot of the, like, interplay between these characters all reminds me of La La Land. You know, it's an up and coming people. Same story as Sidney Palmer, where it's like, oh well, he joins that groovy modern, you know, fusion band, and he's like, well, I'm making a lot of money, but I don't like this, and he goes back and he's happy. I mean, I've seen this story before, but La La Land is like way more compact. It's tight. It's got a great story and a unique story too. Like, it's like Hugo, where it tells Hollywood story without overly relying on Hollywood cliches. And Babylon is like that, but just muddied with too much appreciation for Hollywood. That doesn't really serve a purpose, you know, other than to make people who love Hollywood and Hollywood history go, oh, that's so cool.
Like, there are many scenes, like individual scenes, that I think I would say are like straight up fantastic. You know, like they're like I think it was one shot, like the one shot where, like, going through the entire like silent film production era, and also like the first day of shooting, Nellie's first day of shooting a sound movie. I thought that was great in the frustration everyone was feeling, you know.
Well, I thought that was a great scene, especially with the guy, what was his name, Bob Bill in the box.
Oh, yeah.
Dying. Yeah, I thought it was that was a nice touch. I would have liked to see more scenes with, I don't know, clever critique if you're going to go all in on Hollywood rather than.
Well, the studio executive looked like Harvey Weinstein. Like,
wait a minute, there's fucking Jeff Garland.
Wait a minute.
But like, tell me he didn't. Like, tell me they didn't make him look like him a little bit, right?
That connection, but I'm making it now.
Jeff Garland plays the same role in Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's like a manager in Hollywood, and they make the same joke. He's talking to Larry David, and a woman comes in to Larry David's office, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're talking with this animal, this monster." He's like, "No, it's not me."
But no, so it's like there's so many great scenes, and even again, like Sydney's like scene, I feel like on its own is like really good and compelling, and how, like, you know, traumatizing it is. But I just feel like it's the whole does not match the sum of its parts. You know, it's like the whole isn't as strong to get together. You know, it's like I wish I wish the whole could have been made as good as some of those scenes, you know. Like I don't
Just I think it's just he likes jazz too much and it hurt the script. Because like, I mean, sound is important, but like, I don't know, why not make a something about a sound guy or something? Like there are a million different stories you could tell.
make
He
a
chose
movie
to tell
about the
story
production of
about
the jazz singer.
music.
What could possibly go wrong?
I mentioned the jazz singer in this.
Is that-
Al Jolson is in the movie. I mean, like,
yeah, I know
Al
exactly.
Jolson is in it.
I'm talking about like the other scenes I don't see, you know, but
So I want to talk about two actors, characters, whatever you want to call them. That was a weird way of phrasing it. That we
They're
see in
both.
the movie. The two actors, and I do want to talk about Nellie Leroy and Margot Robbie. Just hold on her for a minute. I want to talk about Brad Pitt as Jack Conrad because we haven't talked about him at all.
oh yeah. Wow.
And I want to talk about Tobey Maguire because Declan said he had a lot to say about Tobey Maguire.
I
So let's
wanna
start with
hear what Declan has to say about Tobey
let's start with
Maguire.
Jack Conrad, just because I felt like Brad Pitt would have been a bigger part of this movie, and then he sort of ended up being pushed off to the side in the third act.
Yeah, he's a bit like Sidney Palmer. He gets a lot more screen time than Sidney Palmer, and he's fleshed out more, but he's still man, he's just a sad sack. He's like
Yeah.
the death of Hollywood of the first part of Hollywood, just in a man. Quite literally at the end. I kind of like his character, but yeah.
I'm just pissed off that they cut the best moment of the trailer when he starts when he starts dancing up on the ledge. It's not in the movie. Like, it's really out of the film. Like you've got a 3 hour and 9 minute long movie, and you're gonna cut the best moment of the trailer.
Yeah, I don't. I want to know what they cut.
Yeah, I'll say this about Jack Conrad again. Well made, though I do feel like again his story has also similar stories about similar characters told before.
I think he was a similar character. Well, I guess not really in Once Upon a Time. He was playing the stuntman too. His character.
No, yeah, but
his sort of attitude, and I've noticed this a lot about Brad Pitt's more recent roles, like for example, Ladybug in Bullet Train.
Yeah, they have sort of
at this point in his career, and you saw it with Rusty Ryan in the Ocean's trilogy 15, 20 years ago. He's just having fun. And I think what we saw with Cliff Booth in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, what we saw with Ladybug in Bullet Train, and what we saw with Jack Conrad, at least for the first two acts of this film, is Brad Pitt is going to spend the rest of his career just having as much fun as possible. And I think that really shows in his performance. You know, when he's speaking flawless Italian to Olivia Wilde, who's in one scene of this movie. By the way, I'm pretty sure we've all seen Inglourious Bastards at this point. Did anyone else, when he was speaking flawless Italian, just have in their mind over and over again, Gorlami?
I feel like that must have been like it
has to have been, because why else would you have Brad Pitt speaking flawless Italian if not to make fun of that moment, or not make fun of, but
like
a weird homage to it.
Yeah.
But I thought he had an absolute blast in the first two acts, and then pushed off to the side in favor of
he had a blast in the third act too.
Oh my god!
Well done.
Well done, my!
That was too good.
I don't need to say anything else anymore. I think that can be the end. Like screw Tobey Maguire, screw Margot Robbie.
No, I'm kidding. No, but
what else? That one wide open.
Yeah. That was.
I can't believe. Thank you for picking up on it, but I cannot believe I missed it. I said it twice.
What I'll just quickly say, since we're on Jack Conrad's conclusion, the one critique I'll levy at how his character is handled is, what impact does Jack's death have on Manny and Nellie? Like, I kind of feel like
I would
not
think
nothing,
that it has
but
a bigger impact on Manny than Nellie.
But we never see it.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like he dies, and He's just dead.
Like the
They don't
main
address it.
character. I don't know. I wish.
So
I feel like it should have had some greater impact on the wider story. I
should have.
like what.
I agree. It should have.
Yeah, and I just the fact that it didn't, I feel like is indicative of the flaw I have of like there not being a proper cohesive whole to the story.
Well, I think part of it is that Jack kind of is like what grounded Manny when he first got into to Hollywood and everything. And at that point of the film, not only was it like 2 hours, 40 minutes in, and everyone in the audience is just like, all right, let's pick this up and get this over with at that point. But I think it also kind of points to that, like, Manny had lost his way. Like, he didn't know what he was doing at that point. Like, he was completely on his own. Like, he was doing his own thing. That's great. That's fine. But it also is part of why the film is called Babylon, right? I mean, I think we all know at least a little bit of the history of Babylon and essentially the two competing, and so like that is obviously a huge part of this film, and I think, is what we were moving into, right? That Manny had moved on. He had moved on from Jack to a certain extent. He had even moved on from his own original dreams of directing these big pictures, and he was doing all these other different kinds of things. And so he was ungrounded. He was uprooted from his dream, and then he got back to it at the end in the montage. And that's kind of what I was thinking.
It's really well said.
That's a good.
So,
well done.
So now, as we get close to the end here, I want to hear Declan rant about Tobey Maguire's appearance in the film. And I just want to preface this by saying, I don't know where I got this idea, but for some reason, I thought when this film was first announced, when Tobey Maguire was first attached, I thought that they were going to be working in like real life people and fictional people. Do you guys remember that Tobey Maguire was supposed to play Harry Houdini?
What?
I'm pretty sure.
When you said that, I thought you meant he was gonna be playing Tobey Maguire. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
What I was saying.
I understand what you mean now,
sure.
but when you started what you're saying, I did not know what you were. I thought that's what you meant, and I was
I thought they were gonna teleport.
We got it. We got to get in touch with Mandela effect experts. Okay.
I'm pretty sure at some point in the development of Babylon, it was meant to include real life people from that era, and I'm pretty sure Tobey Maguire was supposed to play Houdini.
Man, that would have given me a damn headache if they did that.
Would have been a real punch in
the movie is as,
but I
it's directed. So
the movie is better served for him not. I'm just saying that's what I went in thinking, and maybe I should have done more research beforehand. Anyway, Declan, Tobey Maguire, and then we're done.
Okay, like here's the thing. Now I want to be clear. I love Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. This is not Tobey Maguire hate. I don't have any hate. Okay. I feel like the thing that's so weird is that's the thing. Why is he here? Like it's like at the very end, you have him appear as like
the answer. Okay. Tobey Maguire happens to be a producer for this film. So he probably invested some big time money.
Some of that Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of those Spider-Man royalties.
Oh, if you guys didn't know, Tobey Maguire made a lot of money playing poker. He like retired from Hollywood, but
if you see Molly's Game, this is
actually his
open secret that Michael Cera's character is Tobey Maguire.
This is actually him in Molly's Game. That's just the same person.
Yeah, like he's referred to as Mr. X, but Mr. X is Tobey Maguire as played by
because of the X-Men.
Yeah, but no, it's like I feel like it's so weird the sequence that like the journey, the descent that
Okay.
Tobey Maguire takes them
I mean,
on.
I feel like the producer credit, gets you some things. Like, I don't know, put me in your movie. He probably didn't even need to do that. Probably get hired anyway. But this is definitely a writing thing. All right. Tobey
Oh
Maguire
yeah,
did
yeah.
not write this. This is Damien Chazelle, and I sort of get what he's going for. He wants to talk about the underbelly of LA, but it's near the end of the film, guys. We don't have time for that.
Yeah, it's really only present in the third act. And I think
Honestly.
It's there
this
for 20
turned
minutes.
into this turned into a Nelly owes a mob boss money movie.
Yeah.
2 hours
Yeah.
in.
It's like,
Real
it's
quick.
like it's,
And for way too
With
long.
and directed by David Lynch.
yeah, yeah.
That's what it felt like to me at the end, was like a David Lynch, like Stanley Kubrick, eyes wide shut.
like
So
the
I don't
people
know, it was
they
weird.
have are genuinely terrifying, and it's like
Completely unnecessary.
it's
Have him be a normal mob person, Hey,
it
I'm gonna
gets
break your kneecaps.
it gets into like it's so weird that I'm almost like, is this going into like too far territory?
Also, I
like
don't think he needed
Yes.
to be so discreet about how they were going to kill her. Pour, what was it, acid into her pussy
yeah, like
was the threat.
I mean it's again it's
I didn't think this was a mob movie, guys. What are
like
you doing?
I think it's supposed to be metaphoric for like Hollywood probably, but it's
What is metaphoric about that?
like
What is the replacement for that?
yeah, I guess it's supposed to be
I think they're just trying to riff off the sexuality in the beginning with like, my girl's pussy.
Yeah.
That's what I think is just the messed up part of that. Like, but the corruption of that, I don't know. Like, yeah, you could quote
Supposed to
some
be
of it.
like, corruption of Hollywood, like this is like people
Unnecessary.
doing anything for money and violence and sex in a horrible way or something like that. But
Violence in
it's
movies and sex on TV.
thank you.
I will say this, because this movie has a lot. I think an important rule of thumb is just because you can pull something out of it does not mean that it's important to the movie. Movies are supposed to be around central ideas.
Yes.
Even if you have, a nice idea that like is off to the side, if it has nothing to do with the film, it's going to ruin the rest of those ideas. They feel less concrete. They're just muddled.
It's true.
I think that's the problem here. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of talent here, but there's just too much.
Too much.
There's too much. Yeah, I don't know. That's about it.
And I think that's a really good note to end on. So Babylon is still playing in some movie theaters.
I do recommend seeing it, even though I didn't fully love it.
I will put the caveat, it is really long, so you may want to wait.
It's really long. I would not recommend watching it immediately before or immediately following Avatar: The Way of Water.
Yes.
Avatar movie.
Unless you're in a challenge to stay in a movie theater for 8 hours, in which case you only need to see 2 movies rather than 1. So there you go. Then
I will be in the Oppenheimer Barbie back to back. I hope.
Definitely prepare. Oh, we'll talk about that. Definitely prepare to spend more than the 3 hours and 9 minutes in the movie, unlike what Declan did.
Just make it a day. Your day. You have Babylon Day.
Babylon is so it is still playing in some movie theaters.
Yeah.
Not sure when it's gonna be streaming yet. Margot Robbie's getting award hype for her performance as Nellie Leroy. Theo Calva playing Manny. Brad Pitt might even get a nom. Who knows? So we'll see what happens with Babylon over the next couple of months, but we're gonna be watching it. We already watched it, but we're gonna be watching it in the award cycle. Damien Chazelle, he's an artist. Keep making movies. We are talking Avatar: Way of Water next week. We will see you next Friday. In the meantime, have a nice weekend. Happy 2023.
Bye.